I'm so excited to be here today. I love South by. I love coming back to Austin. I love it for all of the excited, passionate people that are down here to learn, to hit the bars. I like the tequila. No, but in general, I love the energy. I love the thought-provoking conversations that happen when we're down here. And I'm humbled that we have a packed house and there are still people outside that want to get in. So I hope that I don't disappoint and that you take something from this today, something that inspires you, something that gets you to think about something that you hadn't thought of before, or maybe something that you just needed to be reminded of. So as the Global Director of Design at Team Detroit, I have a lot of fun things that I do on a daily basis. I get to create stuff, I get to make stuff, I get to inspire, I get to collaborate. I work on everything from what happens around the globe from a marketing communication standpoint, as well as a media communication standpoint, in terms of how do we bring ideas to life in a beautiful, compelling, and engaging way. I have an amazing team of passionate people that I get to work with, and I'm truly blessed for that and truly grateful. In terms of the diversity of what I do, all of those things connect into what I'm going to talk about today in terms of visual storytelling and the importance and the power behind that in terms of some kind of business and cultural realities that we're dealing with today. So there's 5 things right now that are really driving the need for this conversation. So the first one, I'm so sick of the word big data. It isn't big data, it's ginormous, holy shit data right now. 90% of the data that has been collected has been done in just the last 2 years alone. Like, think about that. I'm old, think about that. That's a lot of data in only 2 years. We're talking about zettabytes of information. That's 21 zeros after that one. But that isn't the scary part. The scary part is that data collection is outpacing data storytelling. Number 2 of the kind of business and cultural realities that we're dealing with, information overload. Shit is coming at us faster than we can react to it. I know you guys all feel this probably in your personal lives and your business lives. We receive 5 times as much information today than we did, a couple decades ago. What does that mean? Number 3, another concern, processing fatigue. Our brains are tired. We're getting so much information. I saw this the other day and I thought, every email, every tweet, every PowerPoint deck, every project you're working on, every text message, every post, all of those things are competing for resources in our brains. Our brains are tired because they are only meant to process a certain amount of information at any given time. And when they reach the limit, they can't process anymore. The decision-making network in our brains can't prioritize. And that's why this is a big concern with all of this stuff coming at us, because of how our brains work. As Daniel Levitin, he's an award-winning scientist and author, an amazing book, An Organized Mind. He didn't pay me to say that today. I just finished it, and it's a really good book. But he talks about, it's as though our brains are configured to make a certain number of decisions per day, and once we reach the limits, we can't make any more, regardless of how important they are. I think this is something that is really relevant to the conversation. Number 4, we're visually wired. Humans like pictures. Again, it's the way our brains work and process information. So this visualization from neomom.com sums it up perfectly. If I'm standing on the side of a cliff and I see the sign on the left as I'm hiking and rocks are about to fall on my head, or I see a sign with a bunch of words on the right, which one is going to leave an instant impact and communicate something to me in the second I need it to communicate? We process a visual scene much quicker than we can labor over copious amounts of text. Visual presentation affects our decision making. It's been proven that a presentation with visuals versus words alone is much more effective and impactful, and the viewer is going to retain more information from it. I love this little piece NPR did on a study that was done at the University of Oxford, where experimental psychologists explored the impact arranging a plate of salad on a plate would have on 60 diners, see, I'll talk about design all day long, 60 diners how they would perceive it and the effect it would have on them. So what they did is they took one salad, same ingredients, same flavor profiles, and they arranged it 3 different ways. One in a giant pile, as most salads are and should be. One where each ingredient was in a neat little designed row, and another where it was designed and plated to look like this abstract Kandinsky painting. What was amazing is that the Kandinsky salad was rated better by an 18% increase over the other 2 presentations, and diners were willing to pay 2 times as much both before and after eating that salad. I have to say, as a foodie, I find this interesting because I will go to restaurants where it's farm to table, amazing food, and I will pay more for a salad that looks like that, and I should know better. Number 5, emotional connection. In our tech-infiltrated landscape, connecting emotionally is key. This is another one of those contextual realities we need to consider, and it goes back to how our brains work. The 2 most important rules, and again, this comes back from the same book, that best remembered experiences need to be distinctive and unique or have a strong emotional component to be better remembered. And I think, again, it goes back to how the brain works. It's like a bottomless junk drawer. As we take in information, it just gets chucked into this junk drawer. It's not organized, it just gets thrown in. The way that the brain is gonna recall information is based on how it's tagged and based on, kind of being flagged with certain things that are gonna trigger a recall. So if you have something that is unique, it's gonna be recalled faster. If it's a unique and emotional experience, then you're gonna have an even greater level of recall and an impact. Think about those experiences you've had in your life. The birth of a firstborn, an amazing dinner, at a new restaurant in Napa Valley, or, a car accident. Doesn't matter what it is. When it's something that's unique and it has a strong emotional component, it's gonna come back. So these are things we need to consider if we wanna make sure that what we're communicating is connecting to who we wanna communicate with, and it's something that's going to connect with them and leave an impact. Bottom line, people connect with their hearts first and then their minds. So what does this mean for business, brands, and marketers? How do we counteract these 5 realities? What are the things we need to do to ensure that we are reaching out and leaving an impact and positively being able to affect compelling change within our business organizations? 2 things. 1, designers are your new BFFs. And trust me, we are not as annoying as they make us out to be in movies. I swear to God, what is it with the designer stereotype? Even if this is true. When engaged properly, design is an amazing and powerful business tool. Design visualizes the abstract, stimulates dialogue, simplifies the complicated, enhances comprehension, can solidify mutual understanding, creates emotional connections, aligns a way forward, and can improve outcomes. And I'm going to go into each one of these a little bit later in some more detail, exactly how and why and what we should think about. But first, I also want to talk about the second thing that this means for business, brands, and marketers. Designers plus analysts plus strategists equals one hot threesome. So designers plus analysts plus strategists is a collective powerhouse that is underutilized as a team and undervalued. But what strength exists considering those cultural realities I was talking about earlier? The rapidly shifting reality has created a new necessity for us: the ability to harness predictive insights and become expert storytellers. We have a new responsibility to help our clients sift through all of that data, all of that information, all of that stuff that's creating such a cognitive load. We have to be able to analyze it, to understand it, to be able to harness that information so that we can do a better job to make sure that it's relevant to their business and help them connect with the consumers and the different audiences that they're trying to reach. And we have to do it in a manner that is relevant, that is real, and that is going to drive action so that we can truly fuel positive momentum for a brand. Because data without insights is just noise. Insights without comprehension doesn't drive action, and comprehension to a great extent is dependent on how well something is visualized, or better yet, visualized Data that is visualized is understood and is acted upon, and there's happiness right there in the center. So what roles do each of these, getting back to that threesome, what roles does each discipline play? So analytics, focusing on data and insight, strategy, focusing on insight and storytelling, design, focusing on the story and the visual language. So when you have analytics combining with strategy, they're figuring out what are we saying. Strategy, connecting in with design, how are we saying it? And design and analytics together, focusing on what does it look like. So going in a little bit deeper, as we look at each of these three disciplines and the role that they can play and bring to the table as that collective powerhouse, analytics should be thinking about what data should we be exploring? What should we be looking at? Is there something out there we haven't explored yet? Is there something out there we have, but can we look at it from a different angle? What is that data telling us? So what is that information? Is this something that we need to be thinking about? How is it useful? What are those things that we understand and what we've been diving in and scrubbing and scouring? And then strategy comes in and figuring out, what story do we want to tell? How do we want to use what insights? How do we want to figure out what's coming out of that? What do we want to tell? Who do we want to tell? There might be multiple things that we're able to pull from something that might direct to one audience, and then something else from that story needs to direct to another. We should be telling ourselves stories on the inside, within our businesses, within our agencies, as well things that we can be sharing outside from a consumer landscape perspective. And we should also be thinking about, should the storytelling process be repeatable? There's a lot of things that can be happening in a redundant fashion that's inefficient. There's certain things that should be automated, other things that should be custom crafted and more of a one-off. We really have to think about the processes that we're using as we go from analytics to insights, from analytics to strategy, as we start to craft these stories that can inform our business. From a design perspective, we need to figure out how to tell that story in a beautiful, clear, engaging, and comprehensible way. What are those right resources and tools to do it? Is there something that we should be doing that typically designers have their hands in? Or should we be using tools that typically analysts do? Should we be cross-pollinating and cross-learning? These are all of the questions and things that we've been exploring and finding some really smart solutions to. And we also have to make sure that as we do this, we're representing the data and the insights accurately. Again, something can be beautiful, but if it's skewing the data, it isn't an accurate representation. You also have things that might be a very accurate representation, but if it's not beautiful, it's not going to check those earlier boxes of being emotionally engaging, being something that someone is going to connect with their heart and their mind, so that it does leave an impact. So by approaching analytic storytelling in a collaborative and connective fashion, we empower each discipline to focus on their strengths. And this is something that's really important. What we found is that designers don't have to become analysts. Analysts don't have to become designers. Designers don't have to become strategists. But what we need is for each of these individual disciplines to understand what the other does. That learning is so key. You need to understand, what is an analyst doing? How are they doing it? Why are they doing it? At a level that you can then collaborate with them better. The same thing on design. Why are designers using color this way? Why are they using typography? What about this hierarchy of information? What are all of these things that are in each of our own disciplines, kind of toolboxes that we use? Because this is so key, because mutual understanding is key to effective collaboration. And if we can understand the how, the why that each of us are doing, then we're going to figure out how all of that plugs in together, so that you can have kind of a sum of the parts that's greater than the whole, and you can truly have that collective powerhouse from a thought leadership standpoint. So this allows us to do a few things and really affect the current business and cultural landscape. One, by working together in this way, we can enhance report clarity and comprehension. I mean, as we started really diving into this space and working, analysts, any analysts out here? Who's in analytics? You guys are brilliant. Like whoa, there's so much. And those, the deep decks and what you guys are pulling out. But what was amazing is when you start to have those conversations and really break it down and truly understand what story is being told by it, and then having a designer figure out through their lens and their process on how to visualize it and how to tell it, and have strategy steering the ship to make sure it's right for a brand, it's right for a business, it's right for the audience, some amazing things can happen. And clarity is key. Again, we talk about cognitive load, information coming at us, ginormous data that's about to surpass zettabytes. So clarity and comprehension is key. It also allows us to expedite. We need to expedite turning data into insights, into actions. The speed at which things are happening, the speed at which technology is shifting, the speed at which we have to digest information, we have to move quickly. And so how we can expedite, thinking about things that we can automate, thinking about things that need a little bit more time, and figuring out how we can work together better is key so that we can have actionable insights and we can affect compelling change for business and organizations. By creating those repeatable and automated processes, we can increase efficiency to better inform. Again, we need to know the why, the how. That efficiency is key so that we can create custom, engaging, and insight-driven narratives, again, like I said, to drive action. Now, information design, visual storytelling, data visualization, none of this is new. You know, this is stuff that we've seen, but there seems to be this insane surge right now, and there is a reason. But I mean, it goes back to the 1800s, and I think that there's some amazing and historic examples that should be good reminders for us. So if we go back to Charles Joseph Menard and Napoleon's March in 1812, again, this is one of my favorites for a few reasons, that he was able to combine so many different types of data points to tell a very simple story within one simple visualization. And if you look at the tan line, for those who aren't familiar with this, you know, when Napoleon decided, hey, in the middle of the winter, I'm gonna go and attack Russia. My troops won't die in freezing cold. So if you look at the tan line as it goes, the height of that line is the number of troops that he started out with in that bottom left corner. And the path that the troops took is the shape. You can see where troops veered off and went up and retreated back. The black line is the retreat back to the start. And if you look at the number of troops that started out, where they veered off, where they came back, what I absolutely love is if you look at just this corner right here, all you need to see is this little corner right in the beginning, and that tells the whole story. How many started out, how many he came back with. And then all the other data points and all the other storytelling is contained within. But again, that level of beauty and simplicity to tell that story. Florence Nightingale, the lady with the lamp, famous nurse. Little did we know that she was also a brilliant data journalist and being able to diagram causes of mortality, again, you know, in a very simple and beautiful way, but it was clear and it helped tell the story in the right way. And then this one, it might not be beautiful, it's simple, but it's highly effective. So if you look at John Snow's map of the 1854 Broad Street cholera outbreak, he was a scientist who said, this disease, I think, is waterborne. It's contaminated water. And everyone's like, you're crazy, it's airborne. And so there was a huge outbreak in the city in London. And what he did is he mapped where all the cases were, and then he mapped where all of the pumps were. And then he saw right around that one pump, there was the most concentrated area of people with the disease. So he went, got the water sample, tested it. They found an unidentifiable and unknown bacteria. They fixed the pump, and within 2 weeks, everyone was well. So again, using the type of visualization that is relative to the type of story, sometimes something so simple can help create clear understanding. And he was able to create change about something that impacted human life by visualizing it the right way. So why today? Why are we seeing this surge? Well, it gets back to the fact that this is no longer a nice to have option that can help us tell stories in a better way and make connections. This is a absolutely imperative and must-have option. This is something that is an absolute necessity now because of those 5 cultural and business contexts we talked about earlier. So we're going to dive into a few design benefits regarding how the power of design can help us in this space and the value that design brings to address those changes. So 1, design visualizes the abstract. It is a problem-solving discipline, and sometimes there can be a lot of abstract notions or difficult to explain concepts that might take 60 pages in a PowerPoint deck or an enormous Excel spreadsheet. If there's a way that we can get to the heart of the top line story and visualize it, and then have a deeper dive, maybe with a little bit more visualization or a little deeper storytelling, we allow someone at a glance to truly be able to understand what we're saying. Again, we're time strapped, so anything that we can do quickly, immediately have that understanding, we can act and move on to the next thing. So again, using proper visualization approaches can really help solidify that abstract and enhance comprehension. Design also stimulates dialogue. Design thinking and execution can take that abstract form and make it something concrete. And I think what's beautiful is design thinking, we don't wear kind of a well-worn path and keep solving problems the same way. Design thinking looks at many different paths to solve a problem. And that's why you're seeing so many designers in more corporate and business leadership levels. You see us because the way that we think to solve business problems might be different than the way other disciplines do. And when you combine all of those different kind of problem-solving styles, you can have greater solutions. And what I love is that, that also helps stimulate that deeper conversation, and it really helps to look at things from varying perspectives, and that can be really impactful. Design can also simplify the complicated. One thing that is really strong about design as a discipline is that we try to say as much as we can with as little as possible. Sometimes more is more, and there's beautiful examples of more is more. But in this situation, in this type of thing, very often less is more. We can make visually complex information simple and clear, easier to process. Again, when we have that overload and complexity in our world, anything that can reduce that cognitive load and make it a bit easier for us to pull out and understand that insight, it's critical. Design is also kind of that meeting of the minds. It's enhancing comprehension. When we do those three things I just talked about, visualizing the abstract, stimulating dialogue, simplifying the complex, what you end up with is better understanding at the end. And this is important because solidifying that mutual understanding, without mutual understanding around a business insight or issue, you're not going to be able to move forward as a team. And if everyone is drawing their own conclusions or drawing their own interpretations on something, you might have people going off in different directions that can be ineffective. But when you can get everyone to see something the same way and have that crystal clear picture, you're going to have a lot more traction and a lot more collaborative kind of forward-moving effort happening. So I think, another thing that also does is it decreases efficiency. And we don't have time in our worlds to be inefficient. It's not an option anymore. I'll talk about, being time-strapped in my talk tomorrow on work-life balance. But I think it is something that, visualization can provide clarity around a point of view. And again, getting back to hearts and minds. Design creates those emotional connections because how something looks influences how we feel about it. It's just human nature. It's how our brain works, like I talked about it. And design uses certain things that create emotional reactions. We use juxtapositions. We use metaphor. We use color. When you think about color, color carries connotations globally and culturally. When you see the color red, it might mean passion or it might say alert. There's a reason that every corporate, kind of traditional corporate logo uses blue. So again, there's tools in our toolbox as designers, or if we're not designers, that we should be considering. We also use things like symbolism, the use of different types of imagery or visual language styles. All of these will affect how someone reacts to the story that you're telling. And it really can help leave that visceral impact on a viewer. So again, that story is retained. It kind of, is able to be recalled and pulled up in that junk drawer of your mind. The stronger the impact, the stronger the retention. Design also aligns a way forward. Design is a cooperative and collaborative discipline. We like to work together. We like to work in teams. We like to bounce things off each other. We want to solve problems and we want to craft beautiful communications. So when you're all working together in that collaborative goal, we really can move forward. It can bring to life a concept in a way that, copious amounts of text or deep decks might not be able to. And again, when you can rally everyone around that same way forward, you can have effectiveness and improve outcomes. Design is human-centered, and that's something that we all have to consider. We are consumers, we are the audiences, but again, everything we do needs to be thinking about who we're talking to, who we're doing it for, what is that greater picture that we're trying to connect with and leave an impact on. These are all qualities that, in the end, human-centered, positive, forward-thinking, innovative, these are all part of the design discipline and qualities that can really push that end result. So as we're using analytic storytelling to help compel change, what should we be thinking about? And there's 4 things. 1, appropriateness. Is what we're doing, our choices, our storytelling methods, are they appropriate to the brand? Again, a brand needs to be consistent. A brand needs to know who it is at that core truth, and it needs to express that truth in a lot of different ways that are connecting with the right people at the right time. So as we're visualizing and doing our analytic storytelling, we have to be appropriate to a brand. But we also have to be appropriate to the type of narrative. There might be a beautiful way to visualize something, but if it makes absolutely no sense for the story that you're telling, you shouldn't be using it. You should be saving that for the appropriate story. We also have to be thinking about the type of audience. Again, the same thing. Who are we talking to? What is going to connect with them in a real way that gets them to relate to it? And then what is the desired outcome? What are we trying to achieve with the story we're trying to tell? Are we trying to get people to ask more questions? Are we uncovering something that needs us to go look and dive deeper? Or is it something that we can then immediately act upon? So again, depending on how we're telling that story, we have to be thinking about the desired outcome and what you can do to really enhance that narrative to have that impact. Again, different types of information, different stories require different types of visualization, and you have to be appropriate. Next, diversity. I'm seeing a lot of the same types of visualizations. There's so many different ways you can tell a story, verbally, visually. And I feel like we're kind of in this rut of infographic, kind of graphic illustrations, and that's something that can be super effective and it has a place. But I think we need to think broader than that. There's such a kind of an arsenal and a toolbox that we could be tapping into. Should we be looking at things from a photographic standpoint, from a video and motion standpoint? What about iconography and how do we use that? And what's the evolution of iconography? It's one thing you kind of see the trends and how things shift. But again, those things are reacting to our cultural landscape. What about typography? How do we use type to make sure it's clean and clear and you're getting that instant understanding, but it's also engaging and inspiring? What about drawing and not losing sight of drawing and hand illustration and things that have that human touch that can make more of that emotional connection? Illustration, motion. All of these things are things that we need to consider, again, against appropriateness, against the type of story, and against the audience that we're trying to talk to. Lastly, or second to last, we need to think about clarification. Again, this gets back to the complexity of what is coming at us, the complexity of some of the data stories that we need to tell, and the insights that we need to communicate. We need to think about simplification, or segmentation, or specialized views, or metaphors. What are those types of things that we can use that can help us tell the story in an appropriate way? The more complex the information is, the more you need to think about simplification. I've been in meetings and I've seen things where you've got a lot that you're telling and you're getting through all of these pages, and we can take a 60-page deck that's telling an overarching story with a lot of detail. How do you communicate that in 4 screens? How do you communicate that in 1 image? Those are the types of things I challenge you guys to think about, and then go as deep as you need to from that point forward. But very often there is a core truth or a core insight or a core story that you can bring to life in a very simple way. And lastly, humility. In our data and technological landscape, it is evolving at the speed of light. Our audiences are changing, our technology is changing, our business landscape, our business problems and objectives are changing. And as all the cultural norms and everything that we do is shifting to adapt to that, we have to be humble and shift too. We don't have all the answers. The second you have an answer and you solve something some way, completely irrelevant 2 days later. So I think it's one of those things, you have to get back to that kind of childlike sense of wonder and exploring and getting back to being a student where you just kind of want to try new things and learn and grow. We have to keep that sense of humility and admit that we don't have all the answers. We're just scratching the surface. And when I was at the I/O Festival, great visualization conference in Minneapolis last year, I was fortunate enough to hear Frieder Nacke talk, a German mathematician, computer scientist, kind of a brilliant forefather in this space. And he said, when you're asked a question of which you have no answer, you learn. And a gap exists between those who are visual versus those who are algorithmic. And we haven't found that sweet space yet. And I think that that's really interesting. And I think there's such a truth in that. And again, you've got these amazing, brilliant, talented people that understand their discipline over here as designers or as analysts or as strategists. But when we can all kind of admit, hey, we're learning and we're sharing and we're kind of creating that mutual understanding around the three and coming together and continuing to try new things, to take chances, to be interesting, to be bold, to compel change, all of that can start to move and create, actions that can help a brand or a business move forward. So I'm going to leave you with a couple parting thoughts, as well as just some examples of some of the work that we've done. So one thought, do what you can with what you have where you are. You don't have to start big. You don't have to build a practice with 50 people and all these different disciplines. Use these things I talked about and bring them in and slowly grow and build from there. And try different ways to work to build up a more positive analytic storytelling practice. Don't forget to create magic for a user, for a viewer, for your audience. Again, it's hearts and minds. We're human. Connect to those human truths, those storytelling truths, and create a little bit of magic to make someone smile and make someone say, wow, I didn't think of it that way. Be inquisitive. Never stop asking questions. I feel like the more I learn, the less I know. And I love that. Provoke someone to think in a different way to solve their problem. Again, that notion of design thinking. Try to solve things or look at things through other people's perspective and lenses, because again, that helps you grow, that helps you learn, and it can contribute to some really great positive change. And get inspired by looking at stuff that moves you. This was something, again, one of the sessions I went to at I/O, where I was really moved by someone who was a fine artist, and everything that she did from a visualization standpoint was a lot of drawing and found art, and she was just inspired by the world around her, and it came into a really unique and different kind of visual storytelling perspective. So again, get inspired and bring that into your work and into your thought process. And I also want to show just a little bit of the work we're done. There's a lot I can't share because it's proprietary and confidential in terms of the data and the insights and the nature of the business of the clients that I work on. But I have 3 little examples that are all different, but I think gives a sense of some things that I just talked about today. And we'll end with a little reel of our work. So I love this visualization. We created this for our Ford Media Communications clients. And who knew that tomato skins from Ketchup Factory go into plastic storage bins in Ford vehicles? So we did this for sustainability efforts, and I love it because A, what they're doing from an environment perspective, and to be able to really be thoughtful in partnerships that can have an impact on what's being thrown away versus what's being reused. But what we wanted to, and what we were tasked with, is can you just create a simple visual that we can share from a media perspective? And it got picked up across the country in a lot of different outlets. But that very simple, tomatoes go in, skins come out, a mad scientist makes shit happen, and then it ends up in the storage bins in a car. So again, it's something that when we think of the Ford brand, it's a very approachable, it's a human brand, it's a friendly brand, it's a very smart and innovative brand. So how can we, again, being true to their brand, visualize something that's unexpected, is arresting, and tells a story without any words in a few simple steps. Another piece we created, and again, this is one single long form piece of content, does not bode well on screen in that way, so we've broken it up into a few different images. But this was something we created in collaboration with our content studio, those amazing people you see hiding back there behind the screens with all of the live feeds going on over there. But what we wanted to do is push out some relevant social context during back to school to moms that are dealing with, and I've got a 7-year-old at home, so dealing with the, back to school shopping and the all the things that go around getting your kid ready to go back to school. And all of those inherent truths, and we wanted to speak to them in a way that would just make them smile in a relevant and delightful and engaging way. And so what we want to do is, rooted in kind of those data and insights that we pulled, be able to kind of give this lighthearted, factual storytelling visualization. We just wanted to inform, inspire. We had a bunch of different individual social media assets that we created. Again, truth, simply told in an engaging way. My son is in 1st grade. I can't help him with math. I don't know what they're doing with Common Core, but so again, what you can help with, what you understand. And then one last example. This infographic, and it's kind of a series of a whole branded program that we created. It was part of a year-long program that Ford did called the Pursuit for a Happy Commute. We took the insights that we found that basically long commutes suck, that being in our car for extended periods of time, in traffic, being stressed, on conference calls, voice texting, because I don't do that while I'm driving, all of those things have a negative impact on us mentally, on us emotionally, on us physically. So what we wanted to do is, Ford and us wanted to really bring to life a positive program that can help give people tips and tricks and tools to counteract that. What are things that we can do and think about? So we created this lighthearted, again, kind of Ford-centric visualization style where we had long-form content that we created, individual kind of social facts that we brought to life, and we held experiential kind of work. So there were things that existed in the digital space, things that existed in the experiential space as well that brought this to life. And lastly, I'm just going to play a quick video. This is by no means all of our work, but just a few snippets of some of the design work, some of the visualization work that we've done, just over probably, the last 6 months to a year, just to give you guys a little snapshot. And I think, hopefully you'll get a little bit of kind of diversity and visual inspiration from this as well. So I know we have some time. I'm happy to take any questions. I think there's someone with a microphone that we can, if anyone has any questions or anything I can dive deeper into.
With dynamic and interactive visualizations, we need more and more engineers, right? Mm-hmm. So how an engineer fits in your 3-cell model?
I think, and again, just because I didn't mention kind of engineering and technology into the equation, similar to our tech lounge that's out here now, they're critical. And that is something that, the foundation of the conversation often happens with that trifecta, that threesome I've talked about. But at a very early stage, we also bring them into the conversation. Because again, they're key to what are we capable of, from an engineering perspective to bring things to life when that type of technology is needed to tell a certain type of story. So I think, we have, at Team Detroit, we've got 64 different disciplines of experts across our organization with kind of deep dives and different nuances of types of talent in each of those. And technology and engineering is a key component to that as well. There's times where we work with people that are within our building, and there's other times where we look and we partner with amazing talent and different partners on the outside as well. So I think it's what is the right talent, what is the right type of thinking, and what is the right technology that you need to bring an idea to life, and then pull that team together from the beginning to be able to have the early on conversation collectively.
You made a really good point about having everyone on your team be specialists, but also generalist enough to know what each other is doing. Yeah. I was just wondering to know, what's the composition of your team? Who do you have on staff? What are their disciplines?
Within Team Detroit, in our Detroit office, which is our headquarters, we have about 1,500 people. We have 18 offices around the world to support all of our clients' business. Within my team specifically, I have 22 designers, everything from kind of interns up to associate design directors that oversee different parts of the business and kind of have ownership of a brand. We do everything from brand guardianship to bringing communications to life to design, to kind of directing, guiding design thinking. But we work as a team in partnership with all 64 of those other disciplines. So you might have, 300 people in strategy, but you've got cross-channel strategists, social media strategists, brand strategists. The same thing when you go into the analytics team. You've got people focusing on social listening, or you've got other people focusing on, kind of looking at more of a kind of a brand view from a holistic perspective. So we have a lot of different types of people across those different channels that work together. And there's times where designers are very hands-on with content. There's other times where the analysts are, the strategists are, and we're guiding the visualization of it. And we have an entire tech team as well that's doing all of the coding, the developing. So again, similar to that question from an engineering perspective, we have a large team in here as well as in Buenos Aires in Argentina that is doing that side of the work as well.
Next one.
Yes.
Hi.
Hi.
What's the book that you mentioned at the beginning of your presentation again? Can you repeat that?
It's An Organized Mind by Daniel J. Levitin. It's thick and heady, but super cool and interesting and helpful. Yeah.
Hey, thank you
Hi.
for all the insights. A question I have is around integrity. Like, how do you have strategies, and what strategies do you use to maintain integrity from the analysts to the strategists to the designers to make sure that the designers and the stories that want to be told by the strategist doesn't end up manipulating or influencing the data?
Yep. What we find is that it's a bit of a back and forth depending on the tools you're using. So there might be times where the designer's going to work in the tools that we use as designers. Maybe we're designing something in Illustrator or in InDesign to kind of figure out the storytelling first. Then we figure out, okay, from here, what is that right production tool to bring it to life? Is it something that we need to lean into tech to code and from an engineering perspective? Or is it something that goes back to the analyst to build in Tableau or bring it to life in Excel? So again, it is a bit of that back and forth, but it's explaining, well, we did this with color to do this. Can you translate that here? So there's, it could be times where there's that back and forth to really understand, and you have to make those decisions on certain things that might be more emotional and aesthetic that aren't, maybe data specific, that you can have some flexibility, and those other areas where you need to be true and you need to make sure that you're not losing that integrity of the data. So again, it really is just a back and forth. It varies on the story, but what we found is that, having the right people up front that are going to be needed to tell that story and to visualize it, engage in the conversation, and just to constantly not be afraid to say, now what do you do and can you do this and how, if you don't know, because again, you've got people that typically may have never worked together before, 10 or 15 years ago, really working very closely together now. You're welcome. Yep, one there, and then I'll get you next.
Great presentation, by the way.
We've got about 15 more minutes, so.
Great presentation, by the way.
Thank you.
Quick question. I know every project's unique, and this is probably proprietary, but do you approach things from a framework where you have estimates for, a typical print ad in a magazine? Because one thing we struggle with at our agency is estimating work and knowing how complex even a simple print ad can be. Can you share some insight into that?
I think it can be challenging, and it's hello! You got my message! Oh my gosh, no way! Hi, buddy! I'll answer the rest of that question in a second. Hi, cutie! My battery is dying. Okay. Hello. Oh my goodness. I'll be upstaged by St. Bernard any day. Hello. Hello. Oh, I know. Did you bring a charger for me? Did you bring me some power? Yep. Okay. Oh my God, that was gooey. Hello. Okay. Oh my goodness, look at you. Well, thank you. I'm sorry, buddy. I'm getting it out. Look at that. I knew my battery would not last my entire presentation. Oh. Thank you, buddy. Thank you, Mofi.
#MofiRescue.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right. Where were we? What was the question? I don't remember. There was you were upstaged by a really cute dog.
And you got a Mophie too.
And a Mophie.
No, my question was around estimates.
Budgeting estimates. Yes, I remember. It is something that's challenging, and I think design by trade, it's a studio discipline. It's a rate card discipline. It's something that, agencies might be covered under a fee, and then, you pay for design a la carte based on what you need. And we know how to estimate, like you said, for things that are, I hate the term traditional media. What we found is that there's parallels in the types of things that we know how long it might take us to do. So whether we're illustrating something, whether we know we've got to dive into something really deep, what we find is that we kind of give a ballpark, and then we say, as we get closer and as we know more, we can kind of hone in that estimate. And there's, what we've done is we've brought a lot of design leadership, into more of an overarching fee so that we can consult and advise on any type of project for a client and brand where design is needed upfront, and then kind of having the rest of the design team still be something that's more, kind of estimated on a production budget or a per project basis. But what I've found helps is getting as much information as you can up front. So we have briefings that are very detailed, where we have an entire form that we've spec'd in this new space, where we ask certain kinds of questions that you might not ask for a different type of creative brief. And really getting to that level of detail, and having technologists in the room, having analysts in the room, having strategists, having account, having creative if needed, having design, having all of those people in the room to have that conversation. Here's what we uncovered. Here's what we find really interesting. Here's the story that we might tell, so that we can figure out, okay, we might do it this way or this way. So I think the more questions you can answer up front, the better you can get to kind of that more clear focused cost standpoint.
That's paid though. That co-creation session is also paid.
There's times where the agency, like you decide, is this something that, are you comfortable with investing in the practice and not charge for something, or is it something that you want to charge for? So again, it depends on your agreement with your clients, the kind of the way that your agency is structured. So I think look at things all different ways to figure out what's going to work for you guys. But I think a level of investment sometimes is needed if you're starting out in that space. And it really depends on the type of story. Is it something that's going to inform you guys internally as an agency, or is it something that's going to go externally, from an audience-facing perspective? Welcome. Yes.
Whenever the last person who talked to you talked about the fact that y'all look for specialists, but at a level generalists. Mm-hmm. How do you maintain that generalist knowledge within your specialist silos of people?
I think having specialists and deep generalists is so important. And there's things, from a entry-level position standpoint in our agency, we have a really in-depth kind of intern and junior program where you kind of get more of a cross-pollination in terms of all the different disciplines in the agency, how you work together. That's really important for someone coming in. At a higher level, again, it's engaging multiple disciplines up front in conversations rather than, well, these guys work on this, then we pass it off, because then you have people working in siloed conversations. And so I think, we're always looking for talent that might have varied experiences. And what we're seeing a lot of is hybrid roles. You're seeing someone who's a creative technologist or an analytic designer or, a design strategist. So when we're finding some of those unique roles where they have a slightly different and varied perspective, that brings added strength and value to the team. So I think it's, encouraging people to be involved in conversations that might be outside of their specific skill set, but they're going to learn about bigger picture things from that. So we do a lot of lunch and learns. We have people coming down where at lunch you bring your lunch and you get to listen for an hour on what happens in our analytic group or what happens in HR. How do recruiters recruit? So that everyone in the agency can get a better understanding of those 64 disciplines so that you can say, for me, it's like, wow, design could really help here. Or design could be really interesting if we had conversations here. So again, it allows all these different groups to better understand each other, become a bit of a deep generalist, to be able to tell our agency story and what we do and the benefits that we can bring for our clients by having those kind of education sessions.
Do you have any internal, we've done it in our space in the past, internal conferences because we have such a large employee base. Mm-hmm. Global.
Yep.
So bringing them together to say, hey,
yep.
here are the different
We do. We'll do kind of internal offsite summits. We'll bring people in from around the world, in our different offices, again, to do that. We'll kind of channel in conferences, to the broader base. So there's a lot that we do from an education and training standpoint. And we have a whole new kind of global training program even that gives people a lot of different avenues to learn and grow inside their skill set in a more specialized way, as well as in a broader understanding. But again, your talent, an agency is nothing without its talent, right? And again, nurturing that talent and allowing them to learn and grow in that range from specialist to generalist is key to us being able to move forward in an effective way in our business landscape. You're welcome. Yes? No one's gonna kick me off stage for like another 5 or 10 minutes, so I'll keep answering questions if I need to.
So I'm curious to know, so I'm a very large technology company.
Okay.
And so I'm sure you've seen, just like Ford, you may have had to do some convincing that this type of content, visual in nature, more emotive, emotional, whereas like my company has been historically very focused on the bottom of the customer journey, the bottom of the funnel, speeds and feeds, all that kind of stuff. So we found in my role, we're really having to convince why this kind of content is so important based on those 5 things that you pointed out. And what I'm really struggling with is showing those like KPIs or of how you connect this type of top of the funnel, early stage customer journey content does impact business results.
Right.
In the reel that you showed with Ford, I mean, I'm sure you've had to have some of those same conversations where you had to kind of prove out why this type of content is so important. Can you kind of explain how, was it just like you just had to kind of do little case studies and pilots and just...
I think you almost have to do yes to the case studies and pilots, and kind of beta work. I think you also have to do your own due diligence on what are the data and insights that you need to communicate that proves...
I'm not interested in likes and shares. Like you really have to
Right.
show them.
Just because a bunch of people like something doesn't mean it's going to affect your bottom line. So I think it really comes down to what is that data and insight and information that you can then present to substantiate why you need something told in this type of analytic storytelling way or visualized in this way versus something else. I think that there is a bit of that kind of beta testing to kind of say, well, it could be this or this. And what has, what is getting that kind of instant understanding, or, because it even can be things in how you present things to your clients. How are you providing them this data or providing them, these insights? Exactly. And I think that there's more and more out there showing kind of the power and the value behind it. It's a matter of uncovering that and being able to kind of share that out and present that value from a numbers standpoint. As designers, you have to speak in business language. It isn't just about making things pretty, and I think when you can speak in a, from a business perspective as to the financial implications or the understanding implications that it brings, you start to shift, but I think it has to be, you have to show. You almost have to invest in and do. There's been times where we were able to kind of take something that looked like this originally and communicated, but it might not have been as clear or as comprehensible, or it needed someone explaining the information if you weren't an analyst that was kind of knee deep in that content. Is there a way that you could shift how you visualize it? And it might not be something that is more emotive, like some of the examples I showed. It can be very basic in how it was structured or how it was organized. But if it was done in a way that all of a sudden someone's like, oh, I get that without someone explaining it to me. It was, self-explanatory. You can see the value in that because, again, that saves time, so it kind of gets back to some of those things I talked about in the beginning and just kind of reiterating, the value in that way.
Love to value add and the data not only, I guess what we're struggling with is really understanding like how can data, you start with data that influences the creative and then the data also tells you how they're creating.
Exactly. And it has to be that full circle. You have to close that loop. Welcome. Anyone else? Before I'm caned? No? Thank you guys.